Okay. Always something you can do. We talk about the introduction of the Windows operating systems. And the systems here they're talking about, probably going to go from XP up through 8.1. Windows 10's coming pretty soon. I've played with the beta. I guess what it is. They don't call them betas anymore. The functionality hasn't changed a whole lot. The functionality of Windows really hasn't changed a whole lot since like NT. The way it works. When we talk about permissions, and that'd probably be a different class, but permissions work the same way from Windows NT through Windows 10, which goes back a long way, goes back to the 90s. So what I like to say in the Windows classes particularly, they don't really change a whole lot. They just change where everything is so that you can look stupid because you can't find it. You know what you want to do, you just don't know where it is anymore. And they're really good at doing those things. How Windows, learn how to use the Windows to interface with users, files, folders, applications, and hardware. That's going to be the GUI that we see, the graphical user interface. We can also get a command prompt. If you have troubles using the F8 key at startup, you can get into different modes of Windows to where you don't go into the full GUI, and you can get to the command line and use things like that. They also have bootable CDs, DVDs that you can use to get into the system. But files and folders, when you were doing DOS, files and folders were directories and files. Folders are simply the directory structure. They call them folders. They have a little folder icon that we use there. Applications, Windows 7, straightforward. Start program, basically the same as it was in XP. Windows 8 changed all of that, and of course we've had the big backlash from that. And then how it interfaces with hardware, and the interfacing with hardware is going to be the drivers. Are the drivers up to date? And does it have a driver? Does it have the correct driver? Those kinds of things. Windows tools that you can use to examine and support the system, and those are the hands-on activities, basically. And there's nothing really, I don't think, dramatic about it. It just takes you through a couple of things that you can look at. By the way, if you want a set of free Windows tools, and I recommend, and I consistently recommend if people don't go get them, sysinternals.com has a zip file that's probably got, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 Windows tools in it that you can use to check things. If you ever, for instance, if you want to know who's got what permissions, it's got one that will give you a list of permissions for a folder, a file, whatever else. A lot of different tools there. But sysinternals.com, it's now part of Windows. So what that means is when you click to run it, you have to agree to the license. It used to be a standalone activity, but Windows co-opted them. But the guy that writes that stuff is really very good. There's tons and tons and tons of tools there. Operating system software controls a computer. And that's what it really does. It gives us an interface between the user, the program, and the hardware. And whether you're using the Apple operating system, the Linux operating system, the Windows operating systems do the same thing. It depends on what you need to do with it. Windows and Mac operating systems tend to be relatively expensive. Linux has got a really great price.
Yes, it does.
Except that I'll put you into a situation that it's Friday afternoon, and they have one of our competitors has a commercial that does this. It's Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and your boss comes up and says, hey, I need you to install this particular piece of software on 600 computers before you go home. How are you going to do that in Linux? Linux guru.
You hire a bunch of
Mexicans. How are you going to do it in Mac?
Magic in the middle.
Magic in the middle.
It doesn't mean anything unless you're subnetting.
Macros and batch files?
Macros and batch files. I can do it in Windows in about 5 minutes. Because all I have to do is go into Active Directory, create a policy, and restart the computer. Or maybe even just have the user log off and log on. That's why corporations use this software. That's why you need to know how to manage this software. And there's always going to be something wrong with it. It's job security. Absolute job security. Although I think they are losing some market share, but from a management standpoint, from a large-scale management standpoint, it is much easier to manage than the other major operating systems. 4 main functions: provide a user interface, manage the files, manage the hardware, and manage applications. And that's basically what we said when we started up, right? What do we mean when we say provide a user interface? This nice GUI, right? See if my check marks work. This nice GUI, or you can boot it into command line where you just have a DOS prompt. Windows 2008 server has this really cool version that the only thing you get is a command prompt. Why did they do that? It's more secure. Less, fewer, not as big of an attack surface for this thing. Manage files. That's what does DOS stand for? Disk operating system. So that says that we're going to manage files, right? Why do we want to manage files? We may want to share them with people. Why do we do all of this stuff? So that we can make the enterprise more efficient. When we do these things. Manage hardware, we're talking about drivers there, and manage applications. Install them, who can use the applications, who can install the applications, what applications do you need in a system. Windows 7 is a huge upgrade to Windows Vista. When you go from, well, we'll let you use Vista, then I have one of those too. Good. For those of you who like Vista, I have a Vista machine. So we can compel you to have it. Back to one of the things we were talking about earlier, when you have XP, Vista will upgrade XP. So if you wanted to go the straight upgrade path, you go from XP to Vista, and Vista to, Windows 7. Most people that do this, upgrading stuff, recommend that you don't upgrade. Because if you have anything wrong with our XP system, when we upgraded to Vista, we just upgraded the problem. You didn't fix it. Upgrades don't fix problems. They just simply transfer the problem to the next operating system. Power user in Windows 7 to be familiar with Vista and XP. I think the bulk of the questions that you'll have on the A+ will be about Windows 7, and they do now ask about Windows 7 Enterprise. Vista, the interface is a little bit different, but it tends to be the same as Windows 7. They fixed the user account control so that it doesn't pop up as often from, and that was Vista wasn't all that stable, but one of the problems that people had with it was every time you turned around and tried to do something, it'd ask you for permission. Windows 7 does that, but not nearly as frequently.
Most of the time it's on first use or something.
Well, if you're making changes that can affect it, changes the registry, changes to the hard drive, it'll tell you you're going to make changes to the hard drive. Do you want to do this? It'll ask you questions like, did you do this? And of course, all your clickers are going to say yes, whether they did or not. One of the things that did happen with these two guys, and I'm digressing, I know, is that you start it with a regular user that has administrative privileges. And when you try to do something that needs administrative authority, that's when you get the pop-up. It says, did you do this? Do you want to do this? XP doesn't have that. Where'd my XP go? XP doesn't have that. You want to use this XP. XP, if you're running as an administrator and you go to one of these sites that can infect you, you just infected yourself. You don't get any pop-up that says, did you do this? It just doesn't. When we were using XP, I always recommended to students that you go on the internet as an ordinary user. When you need to administer something, there's a thing called a secondary logon that you can run. You use a run as command. You can do the management as an administrator, and that's what Windows 7 is doing for you automatically. You're not really running with administrative authority. So if you go to one of these really nasty websites and it tries to give you something really nasty, you should get, as long as you have the user account control configured correctly, a pop-up that said, did you do this? You can turn that off. And then you go to one of those sites and they want to ask you the question, they'll just install it for you. You probably want to have that on. There's a couple of ways you can do it. One is that you got to put in credentials every time, click yes, okay, I did that, and the other one is to just don't do anything. Some people would like to turn it off. I think it's a little bit dangerous to do that. This is kind of the interface between what goes on. We talked about in the last half the hardware and everything that goes on in it. What we have is an application, Microsoft Word or whatever else, goes into the operating system, and the operating system then allows it or helps it or gets it access to the CPU. And access to the CPU is the thing that we really have to make anything work. And then the management inside of the system, what goes on. But there's a whole structure, and in the Windows 7 class we'll look at it. There is a whole big structure of how you actually get access to hardware. And in Windows 2000 on up, the applications no longer have direct access to hardware. When 2000 came out, a lot of game writers were really unhappy because they couldn't have direct access to hardware. What we have in this thing, you've probably seen this before, especially you gamers, an API, an application programming interface, and what you do is go through the API into the operating system. The operating system then, parts of the operating system can have direct access to hardware. There's a bunch of insulation in there. What that prevents is if you get a bad application that grabs control of your processor, you can then make that go away. And we've been doing that since like Windows 95. In Windows 3.11, and that's going back a while, when you use the Control-Alt-Delete keys, what happened? It rebooted. It rebooted, just like it did in DOS, because it really was DOS with some menus on it. When we got to Windows 95 and you hit Control-Alt-Delete, what happened?
Does it bring up Task Manager?
Brings up Task Manager. When you go into Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows Vista, Windows XP, Control-Alt-Delete, what happens?
If you want to shut down or hide.
Task Manager, well, we can start Task Manager.
A lot of menus too now.
So when you start Task Manager, yeah, you can do other stuff with it. But when you get into Task Manager, you can now shut down individual processes. So that's an advantage that these things have when we go through those processes. Windows Desktop provides a really kind of cool GUI. Depending on which one you like. If you like all that swipe stuff in Windows 8, it's kind of a cool GUI. If you don't have a swipe, if you don't have a touch screen, yeah. The wheel on the mouse will actually move it across and those things. They have admitted that they probably made a mistake with that one by forcing people into that interface.
I hate that interface.
Well, once you use it for a while, it's really not bad. That's the one that if you go to that interface, click into it, just start typing the name of whatever it is you want to start, like Word. It'll find it for you.
And Sheldon Cooper said on Big Bang Theory it was more user-friendly. He didn't like it.
Yeah.
I had it on a work computer. I used it for about a year, and I hate it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like it. I mean, it depends.
I like a simple, I don't need anything fancy.
That's really not fancy. It's just pictures.
Right.
It really was, and they said they've admitted they made a mistake. Windows 10's kind of interesting. When you do the start menu on it, you get both. So you can either use the old conventional start menu, or you can use the basically icons is what we're talking about there. The 3D user interface, Aero, and that's one that they're really always real proud of. That's the one that, if you like all of the graphical stuff, that's really great. Remember, anytime you do something clever like that, it's going to take resources. I'm kind of old-fashioned. I just tend to go and set plain blue background on mine to get back the processing. A couple of things, and when you do the virtual machines, as I said, you'll need to do the post-install items, and I'll go over them when we do the installs next time. They're pretty simple to do, but it's turning off a lot of the let Windows make it look pretty instead of let's just make it more efficient. Not available, and this is where you get into things that they kind of love to ask on particularly Microsoft tests, not necessarily here. But when we start with these things, Starter Edition and Home Basic Edition don't have Aero available. Windows 7 requires a gig of RAM and a video card that supports DirectX 9, at least 128 gig of graphics memory, and hard disk space. It requires more hard disk space than it requires to install the operating system, because it puts temporary files on it, and when it gets done, it really does a reasonable job of making those go away. This is a picture of the GUI, and it has this clever little gadgets outfit here, and down here somewhere it says, get more gadgets. And if you go to get more gadgets, you go to a website that says we've discontinued gadgets because they had some real security issues. So be careful about gadgets. I think the ones that are here are probably okay. You can put a clock. The CPU monitor is kind of handy.
Is it because most of them were made by other people and they were...
Now, it's because of I think the ports that had to be open in order for them to operate has some vulnerabilities. Just what does it say down here? The Aero interface has a glassy, transparent look, and you can manage the opacity, how opaque each of the individual items are. You make whatever you want to do with those things. Start menu, username, applications are often listed in the white left, and use the library files in the operating systems. Start menu is the one that's been the big controversy that Matt hates on and I'm not real wild about it personally, on Windows 8, right? Start menu, what's the start menu going to look like? And the Windows 10 gives you everything. But the start menu, you guys have all used those things. This is kind of some basic startup. The desktop uses start menu. The search box, which is now a combined run search, can be handy. If you start typing a command in there, it again will go and search for that command. So if you want cmd.exe and it's not showing up, you can start and type cmd and it will eventually find that thing. Once you get the command, if you want to run it as an administrator, and sometimes you do, particularly the command prompt, you need to right click on the icon that it shows you and run as administrator. Windows Explorer, use a shortcut icon, right-click the program file. On the computer or Explorer, select Create Shortcut. And you can also tell it to move it to the desktop typically, and it'll say, I can't do that, but I'll create a shortcut for you. The shortcuts are kind of handy to have. MS Info 32, I think they talked about last time a little bit. This is a handy utility which will give you information about the computer, the hardware and the software, driver failures, those sorts of things can be found in it. Aero Shake, when I took the Windows 7 certification test, there were actually questions about that, the Aero Shake. So this has got to be something really cool. What it really is if you have a bunch of windows that are open and you shake one of them, all of them will minimize except it. And then if you shake it again, they'll all maximize. So that's basically what we're talking about there. To restore to the original size, drag the window right to left. The snap is really handy where you can have two things open on the screen at the same time. Minimizes all the windows except the one you shake to shake and grab the title bar.
I guess it would be easier than going around minimizing one by
well, it is, but yes, it is. How many things should you have open? And I tend to wind up with a whole ton of stuff open. And when I'm looking for a file, and then I'll go back and go through the whole thing again, I'll have the same directory open, I know, 5 or 6 times. So from those kinds of standpoints, absolutely, yeah, it is easier to minimize them. But what you really need to do is close them to get your resources back. Minimize them, you just don't see them. The notification area, formerly known as the system tray, the bottom right-hand corner of the system, of the area. Service program runs in the background, supports and serves. Right-click on the taskbar to use a shortcut menu. Click properties for these things. And there are activities that you're going to look at some of this stuff. This is one where you've got Internet Explorer open and you hover over it and it shows you what the tabs are. Things that, again, I expect that you have used. The taskbar menus, like the taskbars, auto-hide the taskbars, use small icons. Auto-hide, if you want the screen territory, it will move it down. You can, if the taskbar is not locked, you can move it wherever you want. You put it on the right-hand side of the screen, the left-hand side of the screen, the top of the screen. You can drag them around wherever you want them. Huh?
Done it by accident a few times.
Yeah, a lot of people have done it by accident or close it, drag it down, and it'll go away for you. If you want it really big, you can drag it up and you have it really big, but it takes up a lot of territory for those things. Personalize, and you'll do enough of that. When you get into the virtual machines, they're going to not be really big whenever they start up. You can personalize one of them. You can do the resolution just like you do with a regular machine, and it'll make the virtual machine screen larger. I think they start at 1024 by 768 or something like that. And you can make them bigger when you want to, as you want to. The backgrounds, and this is one I said what I do is go in and I go to the solid colors and make myself a solid blue background. It's just me. But there's a whole bunch of themes in here that you can use. Useful Explorer tools, folders are Windows Explorer and the computer window in those things. List of 7 start, select the computer, those things. Windows Explorer, click the yellow Windows Explorer icon. There's a little folder on the taskbar, which will open the libraries, I think. Start, open the Windows Explorer from the menu. And the files and directories, manages the hard drive. Drives organized into single root directory, and this is a DOS thing. And remember, Windows uses the backslash, Linux uses the // when you do those things. The backslash represents the root, the starting point of the directory structure. Anything under that, subdirectories, and we can have a number of subdirectories. Partitioning and all of that goes back to what we do at in the DOS course. So the hard drive, the C represents the drive letter. The backslash represents the start. You can have files in the root directory. You really shouldn't have that many files in the root directory because one, makes them hard to find. Two, you could delete them inadvertently, all sorts of stuff. not well organized. The directory structure is designed for data organization, program organization. The basic one, the Windows operating system is going to go into C:\Windows or D:\Windows. It's not necessarily going to be C. The boot files, which are about 5 of them, will always be on C, but the Windows folder does not have to be on the C drive. You can put it other places. The boot files will tell it where to go to find the Windows files. But the C:, the drive letter, the colon, and then the backslash, and then wherever we want these things to go. Windows and program files are going to be ones that are created by the system itself. The C: data here will be one that we created. And we have files in here, and then we can have other directories underneath a directory. So we have directories and subdirectories, or sometimes called child directories, parent-child relationship in these things. Root directory can hold files, and other directories are called subdirectories. Child directories have files and subdirectories in it. And this is what we talked about. This says root directory. This is me again. This is not the starting point. This is the drive letter. The backslash represents the starting point of the directory system. And then we have backslash the data, and each of the directories is separated by a backslash, followed by a file name and an extension. Except that Windows does you a favor, and it hides the extensions that it knows about. It hides these really cool extensions like exe and cont. Only the things that can be dangerous. So if it hides those things, and I go to some place and download this really cool new game, or a really cool picture of something, whatever you're doing, and I could then make a file called pic dot. And when you open that picture, unless you've messed up the user account control, it's going to say, did you do this? But you won't see the exe. It'll only look like pic.jpg. You can turn those back on. That's one of the things, this is me again, that I would recommend that you turn on the file extensions so that you have those things. What also messes you up when you don't see them is you save something as like, you save a text document, a notepad document, file save as mydoc.something another, and it'll be mydoc.something another.txt. So if it's .txt, it'll be .txt.txt. So, yeah, and that's one of the things that happens. It will append the extension, but you don't see the extension. The folder structure, how do you want to see it? Details, tiles, content. One of the things about tiles, particularly if you have a picture folder, is it'll give you a little thumbnail with those. The folder, yeah, whatever we want to do with that. The folder structure, the search box in the upper right-hand corner to find a file, and you can actually configure this thing to look inside the documents, to look for words inside documents, and it'll find those too. You have to have the search function turned on, and it's on by default. This is something that really does work pretty well, because when you get into something messy like me and have a home directory that's got, I don't know, 2 or 3 gig worth of documents in it, occasionally you forget where you put something. So sometimes I need to search. Sometimes I need to search inside the documents. You can do those things. This is talking about libraries. C:, and you can create your own libraries. You can create your own directory structure. Click the arrow and select the folder under the tree. And this is, again, just going through the directory structure, through the GUI. And the drop-down will show you everything that's underneath it. I guess we could go and look at some of this stuff that I've kind of mumbled about here. And let's see if I can do my own thing. You gotta help me remember where we are. We're on slide 26 of 300. So if I go to this thing and go to the drop down, I can do content, tiles, details, list. We can do icons if we would prefer icons, small icons, medium, extra large icons if you have trouble seeing stuff. I really don't know why you would want to see those. And then we get some picture stuff in here. Chapter 7, we get those things. Let's try the drop down here with tiles, and we get some imaging on these things, kind of like little icons for the system itself. Show the preview pane. When we click on one of these things, it's going to give us a very short preview of what that file is, and we can turn the preview pane off. If I wanted to, folder and search options, go into this thing, view, and this is where I want it to go. You get to this through the control panel. Down here is, don't show hidden files. I've got it turned off, I think. Hide empty drive. Oh, here we go. Hide extensions for known file types. You can turn that off by unchecking it. So it should now show me the extensions of my file types. Hide protected system files and all sorts of things that are here. And I can apply the view, such as details, icons, to the entire folder. Let's just say OK here. And now, these are all PPTX files. If I go into the details, probably something that you're a little bit more used to seeing, I think, is you get the name, what type it is, and the size of the file, things, and the date it was last modified. Something that is a little more related to what we would see in a DOS environment. You can also get to that through the control panel. But you can turn those things off. Anything that they turn on, you can turn off. So we go right back to where we were. Windows libraries, I said that that's where we were before. Windows libraries are in the libraries, and what they really are basically links to someplace else in the file system itself. It can be stored in different local drives or on the network. It's a collection of one or more folders. And what it does is links you to those. The thing I like Dropbox. The thing I found it very handy for is to make a library entry for Dropbox so that I can always get right to it instead of going through the file structure, C:/my Dropbox or C:/ users, my name, / or wherever the heck it put it by default. For the default libraries, we have the documents, music, pictures, and videos. Can be accessed from the Start menu by default, the first three, and you can use the computer window to do these things. And you can, again, we can create one and then include a folder, what folders we want included in that particular library. You can view the change options assigned to folders. Controls how users view the folders in a folder, what the users can do. File extensions we looked at. Whether you want the folders to cascade. Remember back in Windows 95 when you would have about 800 folders open as you went down the directory structure? You can turn that back on if you want to. You can cascade them, or you can have them all open in the same window. I prefer the same window, but it's too many things going on. To create a file, right-click an unused portion, and you can create a text file, an RTF file, whatever, and other applications. If I wanted to create a Word file, I could do that. It just creates the file. Doesn't put anything in it. You then have to open it and put content in the file itself. Create a folder, right-click, select the parent, create a folder here. Nothing really mystical about any of those things. Copy, move, rename, or delete files and folders. Copy, right-click, select copy, paste, delete. Move changes the location of these things. And when we get into permissions, when you copy something, it's going to inherit the permissions at the destination. If you move something on the same volume, it will keep its permissions. Drag an item, drag and drop is something that we've become accustomed to, that a lot of people like to use. You can use the delete key still. Multiple items. Shift will select everything from the first item that you select to the last item. If you want to select discontiguous, which means they're not always in order, use the Alt key, the Control key to select them, and then you can delete multiple items that are not next to each other. Change the attributes. Properties called file attributes. The attributes of a folder are going to be like read-only, hidden, system properties of these things. You can change those attributes, and occasionally I've gotten stuff like if you get unzip content, and I've had this happen from a CD, DVD, since those things are not read-write typically, they may come on as read-only, and then you drive yourself crazy until you finally look at the attributes and say, oh, it's a read-only folder. Which means that everything inside it inherited the read-only property. And if it's a read-only, you can't change it. You can only read it. Hide a file, make it read-only, flag it to be backed up, the A flag, the archive flag, and those things. And the read-only and the hidden show up immediately. We can also compress or encrypt. You can't do both. You can only do one. Even though it's a checkbox, you can only do one or the other. I was going to go do it on this machine, but there are too many policies. I'm not allowed to encrypt anything on the computer.
Is that
So all it does. BitLocker is a different thing. BitLocker encrypts the entire hard drive.
Okay, what is?
This is just to encrypt a file or a folder.
I mean, what does it use?
It uses the Microsoft encryption algorithm.
Okay, I was thinking encrypted file.
Yeah. It is, encrypted file system. But it's not BitLocker. BitLocker, remember, encrypts the entire hard drive and has a certificate. When you encrypt something here, it will generate a certificate that you can do. And oh, by the way, if you encrypt things, you better save your certificate, because if anything ever happens to your profile, like it gets deleted, the certificate just got deleted, and you have some really cool encrypted files that you can't read anymore because they're encrypted and you don't have the key to get into them.
That's similar to key files.
Yeah, it's a key. Yeah. It's an encryption key, and it's stored in your profile. And when you encrypt things, be sure you save the key to a flash drive or something else, because if anything happens to the hard drive, you're done. The Windows support tools: the system window, the system information window, control panel, action panel, user account control, help and support, and there are, I think, activities for you to do that looks at each of these things. The Action Center is something that's kind of handy. The little flag, it's a little area in the bottom right corner.
Question.
Uh-huh.
Encrypted file system, can it be used on something external to encrypt?
As long as the NTFS file system.
Okay.
But be careful. What are you going to encrypt?
Like an external hard drive.
Oh, yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
It's already in anything.
Yeah. The little flag down here, and I actually have a message. I can go into the Action Center, and it tells me what's going on here. What this one says is there is no backup configured for this computer, and that's true. Because in an enterprise environment, you don't typically back up all of your desktops. Because if you get 300 or 400 desktops, where are you going to back them up to? That's what home directories are about. If you want stuff backed up, you put it in your home directory, and that gets backed up. The servers get backed up, not the individual workstations. Generally, what's going to happen if you have a workstation fail in an enterprise environment, you just wipe it out, start over. If anybody had anything on it, they shouldn't have, because that's what home directories are for, so that you store the stuff there. But this will, if I have issues with the Windows system, it's supposed to show up down here when it does that. So the little flag down here says solve PC issues, one message. Notice that, and I'll leave it on so that I can use it the next time. Turn off messages about Windows backup. If you're getting messages and you don't want them, just don't tell you about it anymore. And it won't tell you about it anymore. Properties, edition, service packs. Yeah, we can look at some of this stuff. The edition, service packs, nothing, I don't think, mystical about a lot of these. If we go to the properties of the computer here, it tells us a lot of what we have. Windows Experience Index is 5.1. Not great, not horrible, but not really good. And the Windows Index, the processor is a 7.5. RAM's a 7.7. Graphics, 5.1. And what this tends to be is a measure of how good your graphics card is, unless you've got a lot of other stuff that's not very good in the system. But that's supposed to be a measure of how good our system is. Let's see if I can get back here. The processor, what goes on, how much RAM do we have? The system type, if I wanted to find out if it's a 32 or a 64-bit system, it's right here. It tells me if this is a 64-bit system. The name of it, the domain that it's in, and then the product key. This is genuine Microsoft product is activated. This one's activated by a key management server, which means that it has to check in every so many hours, days, I don't know how long they've got it set for, and renew its key. In an educational environment, and I just saw another article today that Windows is getting ready to change the way they allow you to license, and it can be by user instead of by computer.
Oh, yeah. So you keep your...
Which means that if you're a user and you use several different computers, you can use Windows on those several different computers.
Don't lose that one.
Yeah. But that's kind of a new approach to their licensing. By the way, Windows licensing is one of the most confusing things you'll ever try to figure out in your entire life. Well, not really, because they get money for all those product keys.
I was going to say it's the biggest joke in the world, too.
What's that?
Their licensing.
Their licensing is awful. Yeah, it just goes around and around and around. And if you ever want to fail, you just call them up and they'll reset it for you. You really don't have to produce a whole lot, but you can change the product key, the device manager, system settings, system protection. A number of different things are here in it. Properties, addition, service pack install, the Windows Experience Index. Those are the things that we just looked at, and here's their picture of it, which you should be able to do here in a few minutes. The system information window details about the system, the processor, the BIOS, the RAM install, the operating system, hard drive size. But you're going to find anything that you can do in Windows one way, you can do probably 4 or 5 other ways. It's something that they didn't do it just once.
I don't care if she smiles, so she start off waving at her. That's all.
The MS info 32. 32. There it is. It shows up. So in my little search bar worked. It found the msinfo32.exe. When we run this thing, it tells us a lot of the same things that we had here. It's a Windows 7 Professional Service Pack 1. Microsoft, the name of the machine. System manufacturers is an HP, the system model. 64-bit, the processor, HP, the information that we want to know about it. If we have hardware conflicts, they'll show up over here. DMA, and I think they have an activity for you to do these also. But what is available on the system, basically with the MS, and that's a pretty good little tool, the msinfo32.exe. Get back to this. Let's see what else that we have on this. The control panel. The control panel, you can either do icons or areas in it. I am kind of old-fashioned in the control panel, and I like to do it this way. You can go back category. If you like categories, you can set it for categories. I like the icons because I can find out what area I want quicker. I don't have to know what category it's in. The categories have been, and I think that's an XP thing. The categories have been driving me nuts ever since we got there. And one of the things that you were talking about, Robert, programs and features is going to be the Windows 7 thing. They have those kinds of things on those tests. What do you have in each of these? The Action Center we looked at. The user account control box, if I'm going to do something that's dangerous, it should show up. You can modify it. It's not recommended that you modify it. You can turn it off.
You don't turn that off anymore.
No, it really doesn't. When you start to install something, you have to have permission to do that. Changes that can affect the security of the machine.
It doesn't come up enough for me anymore to turn
That
it off.
it's very dangerous to turn it off. Windows 7 doesn't get as many viruses as the others did because of the security that are built in. I'm not saying there aren't viruses out there and you're not going to get one, because yes, they're out there. There's malware. There's viruses available. It's just more difficult to get them. In the security class, we try to infect, and we actually go configure the Windows 7 machine, turn off all the security stuff, and try to infect it. And some things it still won't infect itself. So it has done a lot to do that. What you do, and they talk about here malicious programs in the background, the way you log into, the first user that's made on a Windows system is going to be an administrative user. Administrative user is the all-powerful user, can make all the changes to the system. When you log on as that administrative user, you're not running with administrative authority. You have to give yourself that permission when the user account control pops up and you say OK. Or if you configure it more stringently, when it pops up and it says put in a username and a password, or put in a password. Or when you're running here under the policies as a regular ordinary user, and it pops up and says put in some administrative credentials.
No.
But that's what helps with the security of this thing. And it really has gotten to be a better system. This is, do you want to make the following changes? And here we go with the password, if we do those. The Network and Sharing Center helps resolve failed network connection, the control panel, and sharing the NICs that we have. Well, what are we going to do with those? It's down here, the little computer with the pitchfork. I don't know what it is, but we have this icon here. Will give us a listing of a number of things that we have. We can open the Network and Sharing Center. This gives us a little bit of visuals about what's going on. If I didn't have access to the internet, for instance, I'd have a big red X here. I've always thought that these full maps were, through the full map here, oh, it's been disabled, of course. Policy, see? You can really lock down a Windows machine with policies as the administrator. But if we wanted to change something about our NIC, we can get into it here. These are VPN connections, these disconnected ones here. And then we have a Bluetooth here, we have an X. Bluetooth connection 2 is not connected. An X on these things means it's not connected. If you unplug the NIC, it'll give you a red X. It'll give you a red X on the system itself too. So you can see that those things are not available. Advanced sharing settings, what kind of a network are we on? This one I don't have a whole lot of control over because this is a domain machine. Turn off network discovery. Network discovery, when you get into, if you have had networking or when you get into networking, basically NetBIOS. Whether you want the computer to be able to be discovered or not in the system. In the domain, these in here are turned off. Public, they should be turned off. Actually, public, everything should be turned off. A public network is Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever else. Those should always be set as public because it makes firewall changes to keep other users off of your machine and makes you less visible. So when you go to one of those places, you should always tell the system that it is a public network. The home or work network are our private networks, our own private network at home. There's really not a whole lot of difference between home and work networks, except if you designate it as a work network, you can't create a home group. And a home group is a way to share resources within your own network at home. Well, all you have to do is put in a password, join the home group, and then you can share resources from one computer to the other. Yeah, here's the picture that we don't have internet connection. We get this nice red X here to tell us that we can't get there. Help and support, Windows help and support tends to be pretty good. We tend not to use it very much because we tend, guilty, to ask Google. Because Google knows everything, except sometimes Google knows the wrong things. But the help and support is there. There are some things that you really need to go through it to do, like assistance requests and those things, although you really don't. There are a lot of websites out there that allow you to do that. So, what does an operating system do? I said Neil will get to answer these questions, right?
Yeah.
What does an operating system do?
Helps
Manages the
hardware.
Manages the whole computer, right?
Yeah.
Manages the applications, the hardware, gives us a user interface. What was the fourth thing that it did?
Manage files.
Manage files, yeah.
I cheated a little.
Yeah, I kind of think of files as part of the application, so that's just, but yeah. And there are a number of different ones. Which ones you use? The enterprises, again, tend to use Windows because it really does have a good management capability. Questions? Yes.
So which virtual things are we using?
Which virtual things are you using? None of them yet because I haven't made them yet.
What's that?
I'll make them on Thursday when we do the virtual things.
The only difference between... Am I doing them tonight?